Okay. First I'm just gonna introduce myself. I'm Deriana. I am currently in my last semester as a junior at Trinity. My major is human relations and I'm minoring in education.
Wonderful.
Thank you. My long-term career goal is to become a substance abuse counselor or a school counselor.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Thank you. So we're just going to get started. So for the first question, when and where were you born and did you grow up there?
Yeah. So I was born in Washington, D.C., in 1978. I grew up primarily in Silver Spring, Maryland. So spent most of my life in various parts of Silver Spring. So we moved around a little bit, but stayed pretty much in Montgomery County.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so did your parents or guardians work outside of your home?
They did. So, you probably don't know this, but my mom actually taught at Trinity. She went to Trinity. She graduated in 1969,
Amazing.
and then she taught there for about 35 years. Lori Spunt was her name. So she was an English professor and a women's studies professor. So they did work outside the home. And then my dad taught at a boys' high school. He
Mhm.
taught English at Gonzaga, which is in DC. And so, I am one of five. So I am the second of five kids who were born in 6 years. So we were a lot of kids very, very fast. And I think the way that my parents were able to both work full time and have that many kids was they kind of had opposite schedules.
Okay.
So my dad taught during the day while we were in school. My mom was home, particularly when my brothers were little. And then my dad would pick us up from when he was done with school, and my mom would teach night classes.
Oh,
So, the joke always was that they were just strangers passing in the night, right? Because they would trade cars in parking lots with kids in this car and they take the other car, and um, but I think that's kind of how they managed to do it. So I always had the idea that in a relationship or in a marriage, both people would work.
definitely. That's
Yeah,
good. Teamwork always makes the dream work.
it does. It does. It does.
So next, what do you remember about the home you were raised in?
Um, I mean, you know what's crazy, and I don't know if this is true of you too, but I have, very crystal clear memories of, one or two times, when I was little, but I don't have an idea of what the days look like in a lot of ways. There were a lot of kids, right? So I'm used to kind of being a pack. Five kids. I have three brothers and one sister. We were always together. I do remember that. We spent summers together. We were not a summer camp family. So we spent summers together. A lot of books in my house, a lot of art materials, a lot of that. My parents had very strict rules about television. So we did not get to watch a lot of TV when we were growing up. I remember a lot of time spent outside. My dad had was called the dinner time whistle, and we had to be close enough to the house to hear the dinner time whistle. So that was our distance, right? When we heard that it was time to go in. So I remember a lot of time spent playing outside. We lived in a townhouse community,
Mhm.
and one of the amazing things about that was there was 35 kids around my age, and you were kind of enclosed, right? Like there were clear boundaries on where you could and couldn't go. So I remember a lot of time spent outside playing.
Okay. That sounds very
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
So how would you describe your childhood and teenage years prior to college?
I think that we moved when I was 11, and we moved from that townhouse community to a single family home. And I'm sad that we moved in a lot of ways. There is something really, really wonderful about being that close to so many other people. Once we got there, our life became a lot more about the car, which sounds a little bit crazy, but our schools were 25 minutes this way. And then when I went to high school, it was 45 minutes this way. And so we spent a lot of time driving, which I remember not loving. But I went to an all-girls high school in Bethesda, and it was rigorous, and it was an interesting class dynamic. So it was a pretty well-off school, and when you are one of five children and your parents are both teachers, you are not very well off. So I learned a lot about class in high school. I
Mhm.
learned a lot about the have and the have-nots in high school.
Mhm.
So I think it was a academically intense upbringing, and my parents did not shy away from having hard conversations around those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And what did you want to be when you grew up?
I was going to be the next great American writer. It, that's what I wanted to be. As someone, I'm now 45. And you kind of hit a point in your life when you're this old or this age, where you kind of look back and you think, God, what did I think it was going to be like? I wanted to travel the world. When I was 22 or 23, I sold my car and I moved to Spain, not speaking a lick of Spanish, and just figured I'd figure it out. And I kind of did for a little while. But I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to do a lot of traveling. I wanted to always be able to fit everything in my bag.
Hmm.
I now have three kids and two dogs. So that is not what has happened, but I think in early on, that's what I wanted.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're just going to move on more into when you started Trinity. So what had like brought you to Trinity, and was
Yeah.
it your first choice for college?
Mhm. Yeah, so I had looked at a whole bunch of different schools. My mom was pushing Trinity, right? Because she was there and she knew what a great place it was, and she knew how great it had been for her. I was actually supposed to go to another school. So
Mhm.
I was accepted at Loyola in Baltimore,
Okay.
and I went to the orientation, and it was the most depressing thing I'd ever seen. It was a lot of women, it was a lot of young girls wearing a ton of makeup. It was a lot of boys on one side, girls on another. It was a ton of people who looked exactly the same, wearing the same clothes. Everybody was white.
Mhm.
And I thought, I don't want to be here. And I remember coming home and I'm crying and just saying, that's not who I am, right? This is not the world I want to be in. Um, and that's when I enrolled in Trinity. I'd been accepted, so I enrolled at Trinity. And I'm very, very glad I did. I think one of the most fascinating things about an education there is, well, there's a couple things that made me very, very glad when I was there at that age. And as I get older, make me even more happy that I had that experience was that it and is incredibly diverse,
Yeah.
right? Like the world is not all one color, and it's not all one age. And where many of my high school classmates were going to school with other 18-year-old kids, and they were talking about literature with other 18-year-old kids. I was talking about, literature with women who were 30 and 40 and 50, and with women who had babies, and with women who had grandchildren, with
Mhm.
women who had worked, and with women who were 18. And it was like you get a different perspective on the world and you really understand things. And I also think, and I don't know how old you are, but you strike me as young and vibrant.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's something about reading literature when you're 18 and 19 years old, or talking about human relations, or talking about philosophy, or any of these things, which in some ways is very theoretical, right? Because you haven't had a ton of life, right? Even if a lot of things have happened, you just haven't
Mhm.
lived a very long time.
Mhm.
It's very different to talk about, stories of motherhood and stories of loss and stories of grief when
Yes.
you're sitting with someone who has lost a child, or you're sitting with somebody who has lost a job
Mhm.
or has moved to a different city. Like when you're 18, you're very new. And so it wasn't a long answer to your question, but it was not my first choice, but I think that it was a place where I found myself and I felt very, very at home. And I loved that what Trinity did for me then, I think does now, was it didn't say, it's okay if you're different, right? It said, everybody's different.
Yeah.
Come on in.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between those two things. There's a difference between saying, it's okay and embracing it. And I think Trinity really embraced it, and it's what I needed.
Mhm.
And I think it's what a lot of actually people need and don't know that they do. I think a lot of folks go for what is comfortable and
Mhm.
what is the path, right? Like, why wouldn't I have gone to an all-white liberal arts, right? Like that's a path. That's what some people do. But it didn't work for me. And I'm glad that I found Trinity.
I definitely can relate to that. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm 21 and I've
Yes.
learned
Yes.
I've learned so much in such a short time from Trinity, and
Yeah.
a lot of that you definitely hit on the nail.
Yep.
So
It's great.
I'm sorry. Were
No.
you the first person in your family to attend college?
So I was not. So my mom was the first person in her family to attend college. On my dad's side, his parents had both gone to college, so I was not the first person. So growing up, it was expected that I would. There
Mhm.
wasn't a question of whether or not I would go to college. It was where would I go?
Mhm.
But yeah.
Okay. And how would you describe your experience when you were at Trinity?
Yeah. I think it was really rich. It was really the thing about college is about half of it's what you do in a classroom, maybe 25% is what you do in a classroom.
Yeah.
The rest of it is who you're with,
Mhm.
right? The rest of it is going and exploring the city. The rest of it is kind of figuring out how you want to spend your time. And I think that DC offered an incredible place to
Mhm.
explore, right? Like, I think one of the best things I did was get off the campus, was go places, go to the museums and go out to the bars and go to the restaurants and walk around and, just explore the city. And then making sure that I took every opportunity that was given to me. I loved taking classes with older women.
Mhm.
And that sounds, I mean, maybe it sounds a little bit crazy, but like, I loved their perspective. I loved that they understood the world in a different way. I love that they didn't care that much.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and
Yes.
then the stuff that they cared about, they really cared about. And it was good to see that. It was good to see that people could place education in different buckets, or they could place work in different buckets. Like
Mhm.
everything wasn't important. And I think that that was something that really guided me when I was young. And also I had a blast, right? It was just a fun place. It was just a fun place. And I think that that's part of the embracing all different kinds of people and saying,
Definitely.
come in, you're welcome here, and this is where you belong. There were just a ton of creative, bizarre, wonderful, hilarious people there. And people I'm still in touch with today. And it was really a vibrant place to go to school.
Definitely. And so, how were race relations at Trinity when you were a student?
Yeah. So when I was there, it was probably about a third. It was called weekend college. It's not called weekend college anymore. It was about a third part-time night students,
Hmm.
about a third day students who lived on campus, and about a third commuters. So that was kind of the mix. And I would probably say it was probably about, I might get these percentages wrong. It'd be interesting to actually go back and see how wrong I am on some of this stuff. But I think it was probably about 25% white and 25% Hispanic and about 50% Black
Hmm.
at that time. They were generally good. I mean, I think one of the things that has happened in the last several years of, I phrase cancel culture, but this idea of not being able to say anything wrong ever, um, means that there's no space to make a mistake,
Hmm.
right? And I think that we were at a point where we made mistakes. You know what I mean? We said things wrong sometimes, but we talked about it.
Hmm.
And that I worry that that is going away, where you have to always be right. You have to always say the right thing. So I have a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And they're growing up in a very diverse city. They're in a very diverse school. They're experiencing the complexity of the world around them. And kids make mistakes. And I worry that we're We're getting rid of the places and the spaces where it's okay to make a mistake. Not malicious, not trying to hurt anybody, but not knowing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's, I always remember we were in the dorms, and this used to be when, I don't know if this is still true, if they still have dorms in the top of Maine.
Yes, alumni, I think it's called. Yeah,
Okay, right.
look exactly the
Um,
same too.
yeah, I'm sure, right? It's vintage now. It's
Yes,
vintage.
yeah.
Um, but I think you had all of these different people from all over the country, all over the world coming together, and questions of, well, why do you do that, and why do you do this, and why do you eat this, and why do you eat that? Like, it's a different question when you're living with those people, and
Hmm.
it's with interest and lack of knowing rather than accusatory,
Hmm.
right? So, I think living together is a big part of bringing different groups together. And I think we have that. I don't know if that's if the commuters shift, if there's more commuters now, and fewer folks who live on campus, if that still exists,
Hmm.
or not. But there were certainly things that happened. There was a anonymous letter that was written there. I mean, there were things that happened, but I think overall we were able to have conversations that I don't know if they happen in the same way anymore.
Definitely. I really like that. You said people can be curious. People
Mhm.
can't really speak on something they aren't educated yet about. So I
Exactly.
definitely.
Exactly.
And how welcoming was Trinity to gay students when you were attending there?
Yeah, I think it was very welcome, actually. I think that I knew a number of openly gay students.
Hmm.
And there was an LGBTQ group. And there was no, I think the thing that kind of amazed me about Trinity, and this is, so I actually still go there and swim in the
I,
morning
I
sometimes.
work
And,
there. I work at Trinity
you
Center.
do?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You might see me sometimes.
Oh my God.
Uh, but one of the things that I love about it, and you feel it when you're on campus, is there is just this idea that that's who you are.
Hmm.
Cool. It is judgment free is the wrong word, but it is you bring who you are to the space, and that's who you are. And there's no that's good, that's bad, that's fine, that's okay. It's just who you are, and you're allowed to be. And I think that when I think about people say, well, what was it like, back in the day kind of thing. Um, it just was. And I don't know if I'm describing it well, but it was a space and a place where you were allowed to be who you were, and that was accepted. And I love that about it. And as I said, people were weird. And I mean, there was a woman, and I love her to this day. She loved to wear different clothes, right? So one day she would come down and she was wearing like overalls and boots, and the next day she'd come down and she looked like she'd stepped out of like Little House on the Prairie. You know what I mean? She just loved to try different looks on different styles, and that was cool. That was who she was. And there wasn't any assumption that if she wore one thing one day, she couldn't wear something the other day, that people
Hmm.
couldn't change, and that you couldn't be who you wanted to be.
Definitely. And it's still like that. A lot of people still
Yeah,
express their style a lot there. So
I
it's
love it.
yes, I do too. I do too. So who this is like this set of questions is like who was like your Trinity role models? So the first one is
Yeah.
yeah, I can't wait to hear this part. I can't wait. So
Yeah.
like did you have a mentor or a role model at Trinity?
I found a lot of the professors to be incredibly encouraging.
Really?
Um, I think one of the nice things about a very welcoming environment is for the students. It didn't matter if you were a senior or a freshman or whatever you were kind of all equal,
Yep.
which was nice. I had a sociology professor, Roxana Moiadi, who was really incredible and really uh, showed kind of a different way of being, I think. She talked about these things, but she also just kind of lived her life that way. Kathleen McGinnis was a poli-sci professor who was incredible. Like these were just women who were not only talking about what they loved and teaching about what they love, but we're kind of showing a different way of living lives. And I think that's incredibly important for women to see. This whole idea of, in order to envision it, you kind of have to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And, uh, growing up, I grew up in went to Catholic school the whole way. And there were very narrow parameters on what women looked like and what women did.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved seeing a whole new range of, there's a lot of ways to be in this world. You get to decide,
Yeah,
and that I think was very freeing for me.
definitely. And how did those professors that you named, how did they
Mhm.
like contribute to your academic and your personal growth?
Yeah. They pushed me. They pushed me really, really, really hard. And I think one of the things I liked was that they knew who needed pushing and who didn't, and when to
Mm-hmm.
push and when to back off. I think about my career trajectory has linked very, very much to Roxana Moiadi. So I took a class called Women, Men, and Complex Organizations from her that I'll never forget. And in this class, so it was a day class. So there were not a lot of older women in this class. In this class, she was really talking about sexism in the workplace and how it still
Mm-hmm.
existed, and it was insidious, and it was hard to spot, and it was almost worse than before, because before you would be blatantly sexist, right? But now it was really subtle and you didn't realize it. And one of the things, and we were all saying, no, that's not true. That's not true. Everything's fine now, right? With no experience. And one of the things she had us do was we had to interview 4 women CEOs, or very high level executives. And we ended up interviewing primarily alumni from Trinity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they were fascinating, eye-opening conversations about the shit women had to endure, right? And how they got through it, and how they figured out how to get around
Mm-hmm.
men who were blocking them.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being like 20 years old and just having my eyes opened and thinking, oh my God. Because I've been in kind of a sheltered environment in terms of women and men are equal, right? And theoretically, that's a beautiful statement. It's a beautiful thing to say. But rubber meets the road when you're getting a paycheck, and that
Mm-hmm.
paycheck is, thousands of dollars less than what the man is getting.
Right.
It's not equal. It's not the same. And I actually ended up getting my first internship from one of those interviews. And that
Wow.
woman, Julie Galdo, was a Trinity alum, um, and became my professional mentor, and really became someone that to this day I still talk to. Got my first internship with her, got my first job with her, and then kind of we stayed in touch for decades after. So, I think that the eye-opening that some of those classes did, and it happened again in a poli-sci class about child poverty. I ended up starting a nonprofit around childhood poverty, and a lot of it came from a class I took when I remember sitting with Kathleen McGinnis, and she was explaining different things to me. I was like, it doesn't need to be this way, right? Like this is not how we need to live. So I think they started conversations in my brain, and they pushed me in some different ways to think about things that
Mhm.
I would not have otherwise.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
for the last question for this section,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
it says, what what is the most memorable piece of advice you received from your mentor or professor or just someone else at Trinity that like really stuck with you?
It was Roxana Moriarty. So one of the things she said to me is, you always have the question, ask it. Right. And I am someone who's always extremely curious, right? And often was not asking the question because I didn't think that I should. And she said, you should always ask the question, right? And it stayed with me. And I do. I am someone who's always like, hey, but wait about, hey, wait a second. I'm not sure. What can we clarify?
Me too.
Right.
Me too.
And I think it's really important thing to do. People they let a lot of stuff go by. They let things just kind of, I understand that. No qualms, a little about saying, I don't think this is a good idea, or I don't like this, or, and I think got a lot of that from training. People often call me entitled. And I say, I'm not entitled, right? I just know that if I don't understand it and I have questions, other folks have questions too. And
Right.
even if they don't, I do, right? And I'm doing this one time, friends, right? I'm running through this place one time. And so I want to know what's going on. And I want to make sure that if my voice isn't being heard, who else's voice isn't being
Mhm.
heard?
Okay. So for this next question, it's more so about important events in like history while you were in school. So
Okay.
for the first question, it says, can you tell me about one or two historical moments that occurred while you were at Trinity that moved you emotionally?
I'm trying to think here. So, Clinton was elected. Bill Clinton was elected when I was a freshman, and it was the first election that I voted in. So that was kind of incredible. I had
Mhm.
voted for him, and it was, the first time you actually do vote, and you're like, that's the candidate, right? That's the person. I think was really kind of incredible to see. Trying to think what happened then. So I graduated in 2000. Um, and oh God, to be perfectly honest, I really actually can't. I did, I mean, we did that. There were some protests. There were the IMF and World Bank protests um, around canceling the debt of developing countries. That was kind of my senior year, right around then. Trying to think what else. Uh, I think as you get older, this gets harder. Right? Yeah, those are kind of the two that stick out in my mind.
Okay. Sadly,
Yeah.
I don't have the upgrade to Zoom and it's trying to end me in 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So we can get through however many we can
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
out of our control, but I do have a couple more questions, but if it
Sure,
ends,
sure.
I'll just email you after.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So it said, how did these moments impact your life and your career?
Um, I do think the experience and kind of and being in DC during a presidential election is different, right? It has a different feel to it.
Yeah.
I think that it in some ways it's kind of end cap. So I think the experience of Clinton winning and being in DC and having people so excited about it kind of brought together some of these ideas of being politically involved, right? 2000 was also, I think, when Gore Bush, so I don't know if you remember, not remember, but if you know this, so George Bush and Al Gore were running against each other. And Al Gore won the popular vote. So he won more votes, but Bush won the Electoral College. So I remember that happening. I think that I might have graduated by then. I probably had graduated by then because that'd be November of 2000 or November of 99. Maybe I hadn't. Okay, it blends. But I do think one of the things that it did do kind of those bookends is the idea of being politically involved and engaged. And while I have not gone a pure politics route, I have done things in my life that have a lot to do with policy and advocacy. So I think that connection and being in DC for those things, I think was huge.
Definitely. Okay, so this is more so about your career achievements
Mhm.
and significant milestones.
Yeah.
So, what did you do after receiving your undergraduate degree from Trinity?
Yeah. So after I got that degree, I went and I worked in communications for a little while. So I worked in nonprofit low income housing comms. And then I went and taught middle school. So I taught junior high. Um, right? And then I came back and I actually got my master's in teaching at
Hmm.
Trinity and started a 10-year career in museum education. So I worked at the Smithsonian, in the
Wow.
building museum, and the museum before it died. And then after that, I went to the London School of Economics for graduate school when I was about halfway through the museum work. I stopped for a while and went there. And then I came back. And then when I had my first child in 2009, I
Mhm.
started thinking very long and hard about what it was to be a parent in a society that does not support women. And that led me to starting a nonprofit. So I started an organization called the Greater DC Diaper Bank, which provides diapers and formula and period products and different things like that to families in this area. So it started out of my basement when my son was about a year old, and it grew and grew and grew. And today it serves about 45,000 families and distributes about 12 million diapers a year. So it got much, much larger. But I do tie so much of that work back to the child poverty class I took with Kathleen McGinnis, and kind of this look at, why are we doing it this way? There must be better ways to do this. And so in providing all of those materials, what we were really trying to do, and still trying to do, is support the lives of women, right? So people are like, oh, babies, cute, cute, cute. I'm like, nope, no, no, no. This is about economically empowering women. And this
Definitely.
is about, ensuring that women have what they need, what their children need, but also that they're emotionally supported. So, I draw some very bright lines between the work that I did as an undergraduate and the ideas I was exposed to.
Mhm.
And I got to begin thinking about and begin conversing around when I was, 18, 19, 20, and what I ended up doing, professionally for most of my life.
So you would say that that is an accomplishment that you are most proud of professionally and personally?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. We call it our fourth child. I mean, like
Oh,
starting an organization from scratch and kind of growing it. The first year we did it, I was working full time. And so I ran the diaper bank from like, 8 p.m. until midnight, between,
wow.
I was exhausted all the time, and we had no money. I recently left because I was like, this is time for a new leader. I've kind of done what I can do with it. When I left, it was a staff of 12 and a budget of $4.8 million.
Wow.
And it took, a decade to grow it, but I'm incredibly proud that it is as strong as it is, and that it will be there beyond me, right? It will serve families, hopefully for years and years and years to come. So yeah, I am very proud of it.
Definitely. And have you traveled much outside of the country?
I've done a little bit of traveling. So I did live in London for that year when I was at the London School of Economics getting my graduate degree. During that time, I traveled somewhat extensively because you're in Europe, so you might as well travel.
Hmm.
So, I lived in Spain for several months. But Prague and France, I have some friends in France, so I've been there. Um, Jamaica and Mexico, some of the places you think that people go. Um, but I have not traveled extensively in South America, or really anywhere in Asia, so or Africa. So I'd love to make that a priority as I in the next decade.
Definitely. And how do you
Mhm.
hope to be remembered, or what is the kind of legacy that you will hope to leave behind?
Yeah, I think that it goes back to questions. I think for me, I want people to think, well, she's the person who always asked the question I was thinking, or she's the person who wasn't afraid to ask the question. And the question doesn't always help, right? But it sometimes moves the conversation along. And I think that's a really important thing to do. With the diaper bank, I was asking a question, right? Why can't we do better by mothers? Why can't kids have what they need? And sometimes the answer is really simple, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's very complex. But I would hope to be remembered as somebody who asked difficult questions and was ready to hear the answers.
Definitely. And
Yeah,
we have 2 minutes left. I'm gonna try to
yeah,
conjoin the last
do
two.
it, do it.
So what does the world need to know about Trinity, and what is one pivotal piece of advice you would give to current and future Trinity students?
Oh, goodness. I think what the world needs to know is that it is a welcoming space. And that as there are fewer and fewer spaces that embrace people as they are and invite them to bring their whole self um, into their education and into their community, Trinity is one of those places that does it. The advice that I would give is always, as Roxana Moye said, ask the question, right? The world needs a million different kinds of people and a million different kinds of brains and thoughts and ideas and ways to live and love and be. But part of it comes down to raising your voice and asking the questions that you have and the questions you think other people may have who may not be able to raise their voice. So keep talking, keep asking the question.
Definitely. I really want to just thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. This was fun.
Yes, I'm going to reach out to you after this ends
Yeah,
and we
please.
exchange information and just because I'm so interested in
Yeah.
everything you do. It is so important to me. I grew up with a single mom in low
Mm,
income. She's considered low class.
yeah.
And it just means so much that Trinity has given me the opportunity to be exposed to such a different part of diversity and world. And
Yeah.
I'm so obsessed with culture and just learning about
Yes.
different people and just making sure I surround myself with people who are so driven and passionate and motivated to giving back to others and not, just receiving for
Yeah.
themselves. So
Yeah.
I
Please,
definitely
please reach
enjoyed this.
out. Please do that.
Yeah.
And if I can help in any way, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
You're probably going to be you're graduating next year.
Yes. In May
Yes.
next year. Yeah.
Yes. As you're thinking about what's next, if I can help in any way, please, please, please connect.
Okay, I will. Thank you
Okay.
again. You have an
Yeah.
amazing week, and I appreciate you. I'll email you right now.
Sounds good. Have a good
Okay,
one.
thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.